our federal government is currently dealing with right now. These students have debated this year and wrote legislation on going to war with ISIS, resolving healthcare problems, addressing juvenile justice, police violence. And these students take those ideas and go to a college conference for a 4-day conference that starts about 7 in the morning and ends at 11:30 at night. And these students are working throughout the day, revising their bills, cooperating with other students, problem solving, and then voting on their legislation through the legislative process in order to resolve the problems of our country. At Yale this year, these students resolved more problems and passed more legislation than the actual Congress. And by the past 50 years. But it is a bipartisan organization, and we welcome all points of view. I'm going to introduce our president, Alka Zandilia. Will you please rise and introduce our students here and who participated?
So as Mr. Nair said, I'm Alka Zandilia. I'm the president of this club since last year. This is Jeremy Brewer. He's also a senior. Randy Ramirez is actually our junior wood. Jessica Corsa is our secretary. Emily Fenwick is not here, but she is our vice president. PJ Sealer is right here, and Jack Lebrandi is also a senior. So these are the students that went to Yale, but we have over 25 members that come weekly.
Terrific. So we have some certificates for at least some of you, I guess. And these come from the Honorable Chris Murphy. So why don't I read the citation, and then we'll call them forward by name.
That'd be great.
And I'll hand them to you. And so this first one reads, from Christopher S. Murphy, United States Senator, proudly honors, and Alec, I'll ask you to come forward first. In recognition of receiving honorable mention in the Armed Services Committee at the Yale University Model Congress, your dedication to your position was exemplified through your hard work and leadership that you displayed on a consistent basis during this conference. The proud and genuine effort you put forward in all that you do will undoubtedly serve you well as you look towards the future. It is my privilege, and I would say our privilege as well, to honor you and to represent you in the United States Senate. Signed, Christopher S. Murphy, December 16, 2014. So, Alka and company, congratulations. Absolutely correct.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, so PJ Sealert. Jack Alibrandi. Justin Cowson. All right, and our last one is Jeremy Brewer. We love the way that you represent both public school and high school. Thank you.
That was a lot more fun than what we're about to dive into. That's wonderful. It's so nice to be reminded of all the great things that we do, and that really is a result of what we're here to work on this evening. So we move on to the next part of our agenda, which is the budget review and study session. Why don't you
Excellent.
kick it off?
So I have a couple of things, and I want to propose a process for walking through tonight. I think first and foremost, you received all of the detail materials Monday afternoon, and so I'm going to just apologize for the delay. I understand in talking with some people that you generally had a weekend for that prior to dive into. My own kind of struggle in working with, I wouldn't even say struggle, but just trying to understand the process and get you the information you need really contributed to that delay. So you received information in waves. So you got the kind of the top line information in the presentation. You received the detail digitally on Monday. What you have in front of you right now in that binder is the compendium of what you've received so far. And it's organized beginning with the materials you received first, the presentation I gave you, followed by that top line summary material, and then the detail that you typically receive by location. So one of the, based on a conversation we had earlier, and in recognition of the limited amount of time we've had to get into the detail, I'm wondering if the board would like a third workshop. In that budget schedule calendar that I think was put out much earlier this year, there was a placeholder for next week. So that would be something I would defer to your judgment whether or not you want to do that. We would have some time the following week too, prior to the 22nd, which is the public hearing.
I propose that we move through this evening and then have that conversation.
Okay, fair enough. Good.
How do others feel?
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so here's what I would propose as a process. Bruce and I started to get the day together, and so we had some talk about this. So Bruce suggested we kind of start with just, what's the good and the bad? He was calling it the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the good and the bad. So what's the really good news in the budget? What's the really bad news? I'd like to move on from that and have Chuck and the administrators take you through a detailed examination of the proposals that we're making for staffing, because I think that's one of the most significant features of this budget, and I want to make sure you understand what it is we're trying to accomplish, where we're looking to reduce headcount, and what are some of the structural changes we're trying to make. Following that, I wanted to walk through some of the programming priorities for you. Chris had asked me for a more detailed understanding of the way I'm proposing to add enrichment back to Cedar Mill and Miller Driscoll, Cedar Mill and Millbrook. I want to talk about that, as well as some of the other program priorities we have, including technology, some of the course proposal at the high school, so on and so forth. We have a question about textbooks that Chuck will speak to. We had a series of questions about athletics from Lori that Chris will speak to. We also have a review of the capital budget, and then we would just take the other questions as they emerge or at the end, if that makes sense to all of you.
Great. I'm assuming, but verify you'll have somebody capturing all the questions and answers so that we get them up on the website?
Yes, correct, and I had actually intended to have a template for you tonight that I just wasn't able to get to, so I have some questions to start that process. So we'll put everything out for you in email and also on the website. Absolutely.
At this point, is the entire budget book up on the website? Do we know?
No,
What's
what
up
is
on the
up there
website?
is the presentation from the previous workshop and the pieces that you were sent
On Monday.
on
Okay,
Monday.
so well, in perfect fashion,
Okay.
So most
actually,
of
it is the budget book, just not
Yeah.
necessarily in this fashion, but it is
Okay.
all the contents.
So for those of you watching from home, I encourage you to take a look at it. If you have questions, please get them to us.
Okay, so let's start with the bad news. So the bad news, I think, one of the big pieces of bad news is really relates to our per pupil cost, and that's increasing for obvious reasons. It's increasing this year by 4.4%, or $798 per student. And that is really a result because we are proposing an increased budget while we are recognizing a decline in student enrollment. That per pupil increase is really driven by what the cost drivers are, and that's contracted salaries. The other larger increase this year was in purchase professional services, which is really the contracted services for special education outplacements. We have recognized that offset the entire budget through some of the savings that we realized through healthcare. But the simple bottom line is the per pupil is going up.
What was the percentage?
It's 4.4%. So, and I'll put that, if it's not in detail in here, you make sure you have it. So, and that's,
Could I make a comment relative to that?
yeah.
You know, we had asked and received the per location budgets, which, are great because you see what's going on in each building. When you look at that, and you look at it, it calculates the per student expense for each of the buildings. It averages for the 4 facilities to $9,659. If you look at our total budget, in round numbers, it's $80 million. We have 4,000 students, which represents $20,000 per student. And it strikes me that we're spending less per student at the facility level, at the building level, at the teaching level, less than half of what our total budget is. Now, I know that there are a lot clearly support services that come out of the admin, okay, IT and all those things, but it just struck me
Yeah.
that more than half of our budget is outside of facilities.
Except you're going to talk about, right?
Yeah, the
I know we have a lot of other
special
things,
education
special ed and all that.
is not added into the building level
Yeah.
budget.
Right.
Health benefits for the staff is in the
Yeah.
district budget, transportation
And
is in the
I think
district
one of
budget,
the-
so it's a little deceiving to look at.
Right, and I think one of
the
the
building
difficulties that I
budgets.
had, that actually, it's a great question because it's something that I was wrestling with all these guys this year. When you cut it that way,
Yeah.
because of the way special services funding is excluded and captured
Yeah.
by itself,
Yeah.
it doesn't give you an accurate picture of what's happening in the buildings. So one of the things I tried to do in here was provide some new information, which is staffing by location that's inclusive of the sped teacher, so you could have a better look at where are the actual teachers, including sped teachers and specialists and so on and so forth.
Okay. No, it just, that was one thing that stood out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great
Right,
thing.
I would call that the ugly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, rather than the ugly, until there's an allocation
yeah.
to the schools and a measurement of the impact on students, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
And we're actually missing the information that would lead us to conclude whether it's ugly or great.
Yeah.
I don't
Which is
think
the
we-
achievement.
We don't know,
Yeah.
and that's the struggle.
Which is the what, Tom?
I've said it's you're
Achievement.
referring to achievement data.
So first you need to allocate to schools, and then after you allocate to schools, you have to allocate to programs or grades. At some point in time, you're going to try to measure what it means for the children or for the teacher's development.
Yeah.
And becomes an extraordinarily challenging, but I think long-term important cost accounting exercise. Because otherwise, we are going to continue to look at aggregate data, and it's going to be hard to draw definitive conclusions about whether we're spending the right amount of money, too much, too little, and where.
Right, when I
Right,
say.
because superficially, to spend less than half of your total dollars on the direct provision of services to children doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
Special ed piece of that, technology piece of it, the benefit allocation, I mean, so that's not what's happening. We're probably spending 75% of our total spend directly serving students, but then the question is that the right amount? Should it be 80%?
And that's what I'm trying to
You
get at.
have to go through the
I can't,
exercise.
you know,
And we're
that's
probably
exactly
using
what I was
different
trying to get
systems,
to.
you
Yeah.
accumulate data in ways that you haven't in the past in order to get to those
Yeah,
answers.
and I think, as we've talked about around this table earlier this year, part of our challenge right now, today, is about those specific measures because we are in a period of flux.
Yep.
And I strongly believe we'll be in a much better place next year and we'll be able to have some more concrete measures.
But unless you have plans for capturing the data in different ways and then allocating it, you're not.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to take some time and effort. The financial systems and processes, in order to implement those kinds of changes, would take some time.
Right, and when I said it's the ugly number, it is when you cut the data that way, but the reality is, we could never get to that number because we have to provide transportation, we have to
Oh,
provide
yeah,
health
those
services.
things are all in the other half. You know, I understand that. But that being said, it just struck me that, you know, I don't know if it's overhead or what the issue is, but when you
Well,
get down to
I
it.
think what we need to do is get Ken to give us the specifics on it, the
Yeah.
few that he just threw out, transportation, health benefits,
Right.
and special education costs. Another way to look at the data more realistically rolls those numbers in there because we can't deliver in any way, shape, or form based on that cut of the data.
Yeah.
So while it's a real number, it's not a realistic number relative to running the district, so. But it's one of those cuts that we do need to look at,
No, I think so. Yeah,
even though it's ugly.
I agree with Chris. Well, I don't know that it is, ugly.
On the surface, I think it is.
It depends on what we do after we get the allocations and see what we're really spending, at the student level, which is the key. That's what we really, I think that's our challenge is to bore down and get down to, at the student level, what are we really spending? And the delivery of education to our students.
So when you say at the student level, your understanding of that is teachers, materials.
All those things, right. Yeah.
I mean, even transportation, it's not that hard to allocate the
Yeah.
transportation costs,
Yeah.
it's not that hard to allocate the
Yeah.
benefit costs.
Right.
But some others will be incredibly difficult. And then, here's the punchline, then starting to allocate really overhead to line of business, in this case, the student outcomes, is really important. And that's very important when you have over a long period of time, because we need really not 1-year projections, but 5 and 10-year projections. If you presume declining students served without changes in overhead spend, plan for overhead spend, then you will be having imbalances. You will find that we're not spending enough money directly providing services to the children.
I think as we go along here, just based on some of the feedback I've heard, we've each looked at the data from slightly different perspectives. So let's hold those, let Kevin go through his presentation, and then I'm assuming each of us will ask those questions afterwards,
Great.
based on those cuts.
Right. I think the other piece of the bad news that I have is, within our budget, if you look at cost expenditures proportionally, our special education expenditures continue to outpace some of those other areas. And that's, I think, we've known that for some time. I think the related good news to that is we are, in the February meeting, I'll be coming forward with a recommendation for the board to work with a consultant to really conduct that comprehensive review of special education. So we'll be looking forward to doing that, and I feel confident that the vendor that we choose will really come back to us with some good information and a support structure to help us change the culture to ensure that we can effectively manage those costs and really provide a more solid special education program to our kids. So that's the good news coupled with the momentary bad news. I think on the other side of the coin, I think we have quite a bit of good news, and part of it deals with the restructuring proposal that you're going to hear about shortly as it relates to staffing. I'm excited about the new courses that the high school has come forward with. We have a couple of plans that I'll talk through with you about after Chuck does his piece for trying to, as you heard earlier this month, add back enrichment programs in a budget-neutral approach, as well as add world language instruction in grade 3 in a budget-neutral approach. Neither one of those things is settled at this moment in time, so I'm calling them a Plan A, of which we have a Plan B and may in fact need a Plan C and D. So, but particularly as it regards to, in regard to the enrichment spending, I think we have an opportunity here that makes sense. It's a little bit out of the box, but I'll talk you through that at the appropriate time. So, and I guess the last piece of news that I would consider good is, from the moment I've been working in Wilton, I've heard about the Board of Finance's guidelines, and I think we didn't meet the guideline, but we're within striking distance of that guideline, so I think, that was appropriate too, and I would consider that to be good news. So, it's certainly our attempt to manage costs. So, those would be the pieces of good news that I would consider. I'd ask Chuck now to take us through the staffing changes.
Sure. You can find a summary of the proposed staffing changes on the first page under the Supplemental Information tab. It's towards the back. Okay, now before we go into the details, I did want to just explain to you the process that we went through to come up with these recommendations. So when Kevin began in July, he expressed a strong desire to very carefully gather as much information as possible on each and every staff position in the district. And I think that was mostly to help him to understand how things work in the district, but I also think it was to kind of lay the groundwork for analyzing how effective and efficient we are in meeting our district priorities. So all of the central office administrators participated in a series of meetings with the building administrators in which we took a very careful look at each and every staff position in the district. We looked at their full-time equivalency. We had a very detailed discussion about each of their responsibilities. And we also looked at any historical changes in staffing levels over the course of the past several years, and even in some cases, a longer period of time. Once we gathered all of that information, then the entire leadership team began a series of discussions in which we assessed any perceived gaps in services to students and families, services or supports to students and families, any opportunities for increasing our effectiveness and efficiency, either by changing or reassigning responsibilities. And we also took a very careful look, a very careful assessment of our priorities for improving teaching and learning. I should also point out that these discussions were informed by the information that I've been able to gather over the past year and a half through, for instance, my entry plan interviews with administrators, teachers, instructional leaders, and parents, as well as in my day-to-day work with the leadership team and in my observations in classrooms. And so these discussions resulted in the recommendations that we're making for changes in staffing. So you'll notice on the sheet that on the left-hand column, we have a list of reductions in staffing. And on the right-hand column, a list of additions. But I think it's important to point out that these represent, in many of the cases, a transformation of positions. So in other words, we're taking the responsibilities of the positions in the left-hand column and reconfiguring them into the positions on the right-hand column, or reconfiguring them into positions that already exist in the district. In a few cases, the reductions represent decreases in enrollment or in opportunities that we've identified for efficiencies. And likewise, some of the additions represent increased needs, primarily in the area of special services. Okay? So why don't we go through each of these and I kind of explain what I mean. So if you look in the left-hand column, we've given you where the position was budgeted, where the person is actually located, the number of positions and what they are. So to start with, in Miller Driscoll, we have a decrease in 2 classroom teachers. Those are due primarily to decreases in enrollment. At the high school, we have a 1.15 decrease in classroom teachers. Most of that is due to enrollment, I think 0.77. The balance of it is an opportunity that we saw for transforming that position into an instructional coach position. The decrease in the paraprofessional at Miller Driscoll was again due to enrollment, and the decrease in hearing impaired, I think, was also due to a decrease in enrollment of students with hearing.
Right.
Yeah, case-driven. The next 2 positions, the language arts resource teacher and the science resource teacher, those are actually district positions. And we are again transforming them into the coordinator positions. The clerical position at Cider Mill, I believe, was an opportunity for us to reassign responsibilities to other clerical staff. The 2 classroom teachers, we see that as an opportunity to transform those positions into instructional coaches without significantly impacting the size of the classrooms at 2 of the grade levels, I believe, 4th and 5th. The language arts resource position at Cider Mill, again, was a district position, and we are transforming that into a coordinator position. The SPED para, the 1.5 SPED paras at Middlebrook, that is a transformation, correct?
Yes.
We will be, and I'll explain that when we get into the right-hand column, we're going to be trading paraprofessional positions into teaching positions, because our belief is we want our students to be taught by the most highly qualified teachers. And we believe we can do that by eliminating 2 paraprofessional positions and adding a full-time special ed teacher. The AV technicians and the copy center aides, again, were opportunities for us to reassign responsibilities to other positions. And the campus supervisors, I believe, was an opportunity given some of the changes we've made to our security in the building. Bob, I don't know if you'd like to explain that a little bit more.
Well, the board will remember as an example, when we installed the security cameras, we cut the night campus supervisor at that point. And that was an example of leveraging technology and other alternative security measures to try to, find efficiencies. You're probably aware at this point that any day now, we're scheduled to put in the new security booth right at the front of the high school, right at the beginning of the vestibule area, and essentially lock down the front entranceway and try to redirect and refocus student traffic and invoke more safety during the school day. So what we're doing is we're cutting 2 campus supervisors with the idea that we have that increased supervision there, and that with 4 campus supervisors, we can redeploy them by floors and by bus duty and by the duties that they fulfill without compromising student health and safety. So I think that this, with the town support and the town security task force, I think that's a good decision for our school and for our student security, where we have this right in the front, and I think we're increasing security and then essentially taking a careful look at how we're deploying the staff. We do continue to work with, right now, one company to look at the possibility, and it's just a possibility right now, we're trying to be open-minded with some divergent thinking about the possibility of potentially outsourcing the campus supervision to a security firm. And there may be a way through that measure to actually get highly qualified security people on site. Now, we are very cognizant of the fact that whoever is here, we need people who want to work with adolescents and can work with adolescents and carry out the mission of the high school and the security mission in a supportive way. So we've had thoughtful discussions around that important concept as well.
I'm sure you're aware that we've received some feedback at the board level from a couple of parents who have expressed concern in that area. So
I am aware.
Good.
Yeah, and I think, relative to the last piece, if Bob and his committee came to a conclusion where they'd be interested in recommending outsourcing that, we would bring that proposal to the board as a separate proposal for a very thorough discussion. That's not something that we would decide, in absence of, board conversation and probably board vote, actually.
Okay.
Okay, so to continue down through the instructional leaders, you'll see a number of instructional leaders in language arts, social studies, math, and science at the various buildings, as well as .5 technology and the .5 gifted IL instructional leader.
And that's 1 per subject on each of those?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, those are being transformed into the coordinator and coaching positions.
Could I interject one thing, Dr. Smith?
Sure.
The instructional leaders at the high school, we understand, remain intact.
Yes,
They're actually
right.
listed
This
as
is
a
K to
reduction
8.
right there.
This is K to 8,
Oh,
although we
sorry.
are adding instructional coaches at the high school.
Yeah, so it's not the high school, thank you.
So we should just scratch that off?
Yes,
that's an error.
Okay.
Oops.
Scratch it off?
Oops.
Yeah, it's not that we
Yes,
didn't, the high
sorry.
school,
Okay, so
that shouldn't be there.
delete that, okay.
And Chuck, would you speak to the gifted IL? I mean, because those were responsibilities that you were going to take on yourself, right?
Yes, we eliminated, that gifted position was an identification position. They looked at data to identify students as gifted and talented, and I believe that's something that my office can assume the responsibility for.
Okay, so you're just shifting that responsibility?
Yes.
You're not eliminating?
No, we still have an obligation to do it.
Right.
It'll just be done through my office.
Okay.
Now, in the right-hand column, we've listed the positions that I described for you. Most of these positions I described for you at our last meeting. We would be adding 2 curriculum coordinators, 1 for humanities and 1 for science and math, and that would be K to 8. The library media specialist, we're adding at Miller Driscoll. It's a .5, and we're doing that primarily to continue our efforts to further the work that we're doing in terms of learning commons. We've spoken to you about that before, transforming our library media centers into learning commons, and we feel we need the staff to do that. That also has the added benefit of helping to schedule time for collaboration among classroom teachers. The instructional coaches we've spoken about at length. I know that you know that I believe that is probably one of the highest leverage strategies for increasing teacher effectiveness. And we've seen that quite clearly at the elementary level with our literacy coaches.
Chuck,
Sure.
is the budget designation an indication of where the responsibility lies? So
Yes.
Okay, so then the instructional coach that is based at Miller Driscoll but is under the district budget will be led by the district and not by the professionals at Miller Driscoll.
Right. Now, I want to be clear, those people will directly report to me, because I think it's important that I set up consistency in the practice of coaching at the district level. But I will be working very closely with the building principals to set the priorities for coaching at each building. And the principals will have some responsibility in terms of facilitating the scheduling of those coaching sessions. And those coaches will be responsible for being responsive to the needs of the principal and to the teachers in that building.
But they report to you.
Yes, and I
So
will
there's about a
evaluate them.
divided loyalty there? Probably not. They report to you and you make decisions about their performance appraisals.
That's the way I will be evaluated.
I would just sort of know that those who pay control, right?
How did I know that was coming?
Yeah, you knew that. So there's a net transfer, though, if I see it. There are 2 reductions in district headcount and a 7 increase. So there's a transfer of responsibility
Yes.
away from the buildings to the
Right.
district.
And if you recall,
And that's endorsed by the principals.
For the, and again, this is a lot, that's, go ahead, Chuck, just jump in.
no, please, he asked you the question.
I mean, I think that a lot of this is to have that K-12 vertical
Right.
alignment that I think we all desperately,
I'm just trying to test whether there's consensus among the principals.
yeah, I mean, I think we all could talk many times.
I think it's going to be great for the instructional core, a support for our teachers, and I think, you know, I intend to be regularly in touch with this person and working
Yes.
with Dr. Smith in concert to ensure that the building mission is a big part of what we're trying to fulfill here, absolutely.
I mean, the coordinator positions in particular cross buildings. They'll be working with K to 8. So I think it's appropriate for a district person for them to.
Okay.
The coaches, again, are going to be assigned at the building level. I will be evaluating and training them in how to be coaches. But it will be a collaborative approach between myself and the principals, because my goal is to make sure that these coaches are meeting the individual needs of the building, and I can't do that without the help of the principal.
Maria, your thoughts on that?
I agree. We're excited about the opportunity to bring in coaches, and I think, I want to be careful to say that the work that the ILs have done has been exceptional in many ways, and what we found is that there have been limitations to what they can do based on their schedules. They're full-time classroom teachers, and they're in buildings. They're not able to work with other buildings, with other ILs at times, and so that's something that's been a challenge for them. But the work that they've done to this point has been.
In fact, I want to color that a little bit more. In the conversations that we've had with some of the ILs, my fear was that some of them at least, were kind of recognizing this shift in approach as perhaps an acknowledgement that they weren't indeed doing a good job, and that's not the case at all. Our ILs are unbelievable. I mean, they do incredible work. The challenge as I see it today is that the curriculum and the curriculum demands have shifted dramatically, and by simple virtue of their schedule, because they're teaching all day, they can't provide the kind of intensive support that so many of our teachers need so they can make the instructional adjustments that will enable us to really propel us forward.
And that came out very clearly during my entry plan interviews with all of the instructional leaders. Their frustration at not being able to follow through and be there for teachers when they really needed them. They're just very clear that they weren't able to do that, and it was frustrating for them.
Yeah, I guess too, there's a human cost to this too, because some of these folks, this is real money in their pockets for the real work that they do, and so some of these folks as a result of the reduction of the position, are making less money, will be making less money next year. And that's something that's, I know it's weighed heavily on all of us as part of our decision-making, but I think what we're attempting to do here is truly in the best interest of kids and teachers.
Cheryl, you're just quickly, Cheryl, you're the only one we didn't hear from.
I'm in consensus with the rest. It's something that we talked about as a team, and we're looking forward to having this instructional coach that we have not had in the past. And I do think it needs to be articulated across the district. That's something we have missed, is that vertical articulation. But I have no doubt that the day-to-day will be what we're doing in the building, that we need to direct the day-to-day, because we're the ones that are going to be there, making sure that that occurs. So it's a collaborative effort.
Great, thank you. Lauren?
I wanted to ask about the difference between a subject matter IL versus an instructional leader. If I'm now a social studies teacher at Middlebrook and I have a question and I go to my instructional leader for assistance, we're both content experts. He or she is a content expert and we're talking social studies. Now I go to my instructional coach who might have a background in mathematics or whatever. So talk to me about how that adjustment and how that change will affect how things are done.
Right. Well, with the instructional coaches, we have to keep in mind that although there is some discipline-specific pedagogy, good instruction is good instruction. And we have a rubric of what we want to see happening in classrooms, what kind of learning we want to see students engaging in, and what kind of content assessment and instructional practices we want teachers to engage in. So that's going to be the focus of the coaches within the context of different subject areas. My hope is that between the coordinators and the coaches, I can provide a balance between the two that they will be working on. So for instance, if we have a humanities coordinator who is primarily an English language arts person, my hope would be to have coaches who have expertise in social studies so that they can balance one another. It's less of an issue, I think, at the elementary level, a bit more of an issue at the secondary level. All teachers teach all subject areas at the elementary level, so we all have expertise in everything, supposedly.
So that goes back to that these instructional coaches at the district level will now work also in partnership with the curriculum coordinators at the district level.
And my goal is to have a balance across all subject areas in those
And
positions.
can I ask, is the board clear on the coordinator role? I mean, that was something we addressed very briefly. You said that.
Yes, that was going to be my question. Can you just,
sure,
maybe
thank
I
you.
missed it. So can you please
Explain the curriculum coordinator.
like, what is the coordinator doing
Sure.
and how does it
Would
relate
it be
to-
helpful for you to look at a draft job description?
Yes.
Okay, so I happen to have them.
Great
That's all good.
Set up there.
While you're doing that, Penny,
Okay.
assuming the budget is approved as it's presented, these positions and these changes will take effect at the beginning of the coming school year. Have we either already identified or in the process of identifying who these coaches might be? I would think that they would be chosen from among our best, which says, now are we diminishing the quality that we have in the classroom now?
Or spreading it around more.
There's a position to take, as we spread around more. Are we pulling out one of our best?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yes.
Potentially, but you also have to realize that some people, I believe, may feel ready for a different challenge.
I understand. Okay. That's just a concern that goes, if I'm taking, 4 of my absolute best, or how many, we got 2, 4, 6, how many of these in 2, 4, 6, 8, or instructional code 5 instructional coaches? Am I taking 5 of my absolute best teachers out, repositioning them, and giving up in the classroom?
But Glenn, think maybe the way to look at it is we're taking these great teachers who are now going to teach our
Exactly,
teacher
right,
mentors
yeah.
and so
That's absolutely the theory guiding the decision here, is to build capacity.
Yes.
And spread the wealth.
But to that
Exactly.
point, is this considered a promotion or how does this?
No, I don't know if it's a promotion. Within the contract, it's I mean, you're a teacher within the teacher's contract.
But it
Okay.
is an opportunity for teachers to assume a
Leadership.
leadership
Yeah.
role, which many of them are ready for.
Okay.
But do we anticipate that they will all be internal people? Do you anticipate
We have said at
going
this point, we
outside?
will not be looking outside. No, we will be looking inside.
But good, and I think that's the right thing to do, so we'll be fine.
I mean, they have to be posted, we have to interview people.
Right.
I certainly have in mind people that I think would be good for this, but we have to think down the road, yes. Be open. So if you look at those positions, you have two right there, the curriculum coordinator and the instructional coach.
I didn't get the whole thing.
I'm sorry. Here, what do you need?
I messed up the distribution. Here, here's one complete package. I need one complete package.
Okay, here you go.
There you go. Did you get the whole thing?
Do you have
Everybody
both?
else got the whole thing,
Chris, do
right?
you have both?
The curriculum coordinator has 3 pages and the.
There's
3 pages and 2 pages.
Read two.
Perfect. I got it.
Okay.
All right, good.
Chris,
Sorry. I screwed up.
So,
You know this
just in
already.
summary, I wrote
Share.
it. Just to summarize, the curriculum coordinators K-8 will be primarily responsible for developing the curriculum and leading the process of developing the curriculum in both areas that they're assigned to. So for instance, the humanities person will be responsible for English, language, arts, and social studies. The science math will be responsible for science and math. And that's curriculum, what we're teaching. Are we developing an appropriate sequence of goals and objectives? Are they aligned to the Common Core? Have we developed appropriate assessments? Do we have all the materials and resources needed for teachers? They will also be doing a lot of work with the coaches to make sure that the curriculum is being implemented the way we think it should be implemented. The coaches will actually be engaging in coaching cycles with each of the teachers. And that involves sitting down with the teachers, reviewing their professional evaluation results, identifying areas for growth, setting goals, developing an individualized personalized professional learning plan for each of the teachers. And then, depending upon what that plan looks like, the coach could engage in a variety of different activities. They could, for instance, go in for a period of time and model lessons. They could also observe the teacher doing lessons and giving feedback. They could be sitting in on instructional effectiveness team meetings and helping teachers work through improving their practice as a group. Part of their time will also be devoted to what I call response time. So they will be available to answer questions, get materials, do whatever it is that teachers need to do what they need to do. Principals also need things from the coaches. They might need them to plan for a particular professional learning activity, gather materials for a parent meeting, analyze data. There's a lot of things. It's all
Would it be
detailed in there.
accurate to summarize what you said by saying the curriculum coordinators are focused on the quality of the content and the instructional coaches are focused on the quality of the delivery?
Absolutely.
Thank
That's a
you.
good way of putting it.
And I would say alignment is the other piece that was
Yes.
really important for us,
Right.
especially across the building, which is, I think, one of my own priorities, for this district, is that we have clear articulation.
At the K through 8 level, help me understand how much of the curriculum is dictated by Common Core. Because I spent some time today looking at 6th grade math, and it's pretty dictatorial, what they're supposed to know and how it's supposed to be delivered and what we're supposed to be teaching. I mean, there's not a lot of curriculum development there. It's laid out.
Yes, it is. Although I'm not, okay, so you're asking a very complex question. What we've
Do we want to
decided.
take that offline?
No, it'll be
We
very,
can.
let me give you a fairly quick answer. The Common Core specifies what kids should know and be able to do. It does not specify the methodology. We as a district chose Math and Focus
Right.
as the approach that we were going to use. Our teachers at this point are at a phase of implementation that's fairly mechanical. And that's not unusual when you first start using a new system, because it's requiring some pretty significant shifts in the way they've taught math. My hope is that over time, as they've gone through it, they'll refine their practice, they will be making some decisions about what we don't need to do, what we could do, how we could switch units around. They're just not at that stage right now. So they are adhering to the book pretty closely. But that's okay, I think, at this point in their development as of teachers of math. Did that make sense? I think what you're seeing is probably a fairly rigid implementation of the Math and Focus program.
Yeah.
But until they've had an opportunity to reflect on their practice over time, I don't know that they can implement it in a more flexible and responsive way.
All right, we can have a broader discussion.
We could discuss it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What happens to curriculum at the high school?
Well, curriculum at the high school will remain the responsibility of the instructional leaders. It's
Okay.
our intent to take some time to study a structure at the high school that would work for them. I think that department heads might be the best way to go with them. But again, we need more time to study that issue and think about how we might want to do it. I also just have to be honest, I can only manage a certain amount of change at once. So we're going to start K-8 and then we'll see. It's just kind of phasing it in.
And that's been our position, I think, with, the teachers that were in the spring perhaps will be, this coming spring, better prepared to make it. Right?
Yeah. I think we need to be sensitive. I mean, you're not the only one feeling that way. I've heard it echoed
That's
all
fine.
across
Yeah.
the staff, and I mean, we need to be appropriate, sensitive, and certainly have a clear methodology with room for adjustment as we implement that.
The high school's also going through their NEASC
Yeah.
certification. I
Right.
just
Right.
don't.
Chuck, are the
Go ahead. Yes.
are the instructional coaches the primary observers of the teachers, and they'll be filling out their evaluations?
No,
Or is
they
that
will
still
not.
the principal?
It's very important with coaches that they not take on an evaluative role. We want to make it safe for teachers to be able to say, this is hard for me, I don't get it. They're not going to do that with an evaluator.
Will they be able to in any way alleviate some of the pressure on the principals?
Not at this point because
Okay.
we are not requiring an O9.
Thank you.
And just one more question. Instructional
Although,
coach-
I do want to follow that up. One of the things that the coaches will do is that they will be meeting with the principals on a regular basis to inform them of what they've been doing in terms of coaching teachers, so that when administrators go into the classroom, they can look for evidence that that practice is actually occurring. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's fine. I just had, so the instructional coaches at Middlebrook and high school will be a different, are also going to be working with the team leaders. I mean, I assume at Middlebrook, obviously, once you leave grade school, you're going into a different structure. So
Yes.
Middlebrook will still have their team organization, and then the high school is maintaining its IL. So the instructional leaders will have, instructional coaches will have relationships with the team leaders and the ILs?
I think they absolutely will, although they will be doing coaching cycles with individual teachers. And because the instructional leaders are teachers, they'll be coached as well.
Oh,
Me too, yeah.
right, right, okay. One's KE, the other one's all, okay.
It's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
this
It is
is,
a lot.
something, I think it was, Chip Gual said it when we were talking about this with some of the high school ILs. He said, we've done things one way for a long time, so just know that. And so again, we're just reminded that, change for many is difficult. But I go back to, my core belief that now is the time for this, given all of the curricular changes and instructional demands. And I think, related to that, I've heard very plainly from the teachers, they're desperate for more support.
Yes.
I've heard this in every single building, and I think that we have a real obligation to support them in the best way we can. And this proposal, in my opinion anyway, meets that.
Have either of you gentlemen ever worked under a setup like this?
I had, in my previous district, it
Yeah.
wasn't quite this way, but comparable for sure. And I think, certainly, weren't you a coordinator or something in your previous district?
Oh, you were a curriculum coordinator. Yeah. Greenwich.
So is
That's
that-
why I totally understand the collaboration between central office and the building principals, because I had to do that on a
Okay.
daily basis.
With me?
Yes, with you.
good
So,
old
you know, it works.
These are the good old.
Yeah, I guess probably the last point I would make, and it's not really apropos of the budget, but just professionally, what we're trying to do across the organization is create more opportunities for shared professional learning opportunities. At the administrative level, as you're, I'm sure, aware, we gather just about every Friday as an administrative team. We're working through book studies and having lots of new opportunities to interact and collaborate across buildings and share ideas and generate some common knowledge around best practices. Chuck has been leading the instructional rounds that some of you participated in. Our plan looking down the road is to really move that model down to the teacher level and create opportunities for teachers to, in the most non-threatening way possible, to sit inside each other's classrooms, to observe, to give feedback, and to really strengthen that professional culture at that level. We're really just at the very beginning of this, and we're a number of years away, but the idea is to develop the capacity across the district. Our resources are all, spent on teachers, so we need to make sure that they are operating at the highest professional capacity possible.
And I think the profession has evolved to the point where we understand that simply doing a workshop and then hoping that things occur in the classroom isn't working.
No.
Teachers really need somebody working right alongside them, problem solving as they implement it, and address the issues that they have right in front of them in their classroom. That's where we're really going to see change. The only other two changes on the right-hand side are speech pathologists for the preschool and the high school. Now, that last one, the SPED teacher, again, that is the additional special education teacher that we got by trading in two of the paraprofessionals.
It says .5 on the side, no.
It was
1.5?
Oh, and then there's one up above?
No, it's not an even, so it's because I think we were
So
trying to do...
1.5 to one full teacher,
Yeah.
gotcha, okay, all right.
7:30, I think.
All of these are reflected in the numbers, right?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes. And you can see the total head count reduction and the savings.
Yeah, and to my earlier question, or earlier comment, these people now coming, reporting directly to Chuck fall into the district overhead as opposed to school, but they are directly at the schools.
Yes.
And so that is one of the things that,
Affects that.
It's a
Affects
false
that
dichotomy
cost,
right,
in one respect.
yeah.
Right.
And that's what I think, the way that this budget has traditionally been organized has exacerbated some of that.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate the explanation.
Good.
Yeah, it's interesting,
And this
obviously, that
doesn't
this
change because
this
the
structure,
cost
which
line
feels to me like a focus.
That's still accurate?
Does this doesn't change because
So you
of
have a
that?
question?
I was asking if the total net
No.
savings does not get affected when we cross
I
out
just got
the-
overzealous and added the
Okay.
high school to it.
But the
Glad we
number's
talked about
correct.
that.
Yeah, the number was
The number is
calculated
correct,
by high
though.
school.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
That's what's most important.
Just to kind of close this out,
Yeah.
the one feeling that I have on this is it's focused on trying to increase quality
Yes.
Yeah.
across the district in the way we teach and what we teach. And it's positive that it has a positive impact on our budget.
It's important to include that because that net savings is masked by the overall cost, the salary cost increase because of the sizable contractual increase that was agreed on in the contract this year.
Okay.
Okay, so next major item. So we heard at the community conversation very loudly and clearly, a number of us have heard it over the course of this half of the year in a couple of different venues, the desire on the part of many of our parents, particularly at Southern Mill and Middlebrook, to restore some enrichment opportunities that were cut in previous years. And the way that we're looking at enrichment opportunities is really looking at providing new appropriate after-school or before-school activities through the form of clubs to support the overall learning of kids. The reason that it is not a line item embedded in the budget, although Jen, you have $10,000 dedicated towards enrichment, correct, for the Renzulli program. But in that list of options is because Through the budget development process over the course of the last 6 weeks, I learned that the continuing education account, which is a Board of Education account, has carried a fairly sizable surplus for a number of years. So my read was somewhere around $400,000 that's accrued forever, I guess. So I think that, number one, we're a not-for-profit organization. I don't know that we should be carrying surpluses of that magnitude. Those funds have accrued over time. I don't know that we have a mechanism for doing anything else with them. So it's my thinking, and I believe that this board has the authority to reallocate those funds toward an appropriate program. It seemed to me that after-school enrichment programs are in line with what those funds could be dedicated for. So that's why I said to you at the initial presentation that I'm pursuing trying to get this done in a cost-neutral way. It's out of the box. I have not had experience in taking funds from, I've not had this experience where there's a surplus someplace. So I want to make sure that, that the board has the authority to make these changes. So I've spoken to our council and I'm asking for an opinion. The account also lives under the town, correct, Ken? So it's not cut and dry, and that's why I don't have a recommendation for you today to make this change. But I fully expect that in the next few weeks I'm going to come forward with a proposal for a request to reallocate these funds. That's Plan A.
Okay, so just a question.
Yeah, you probably have a lot of questions.
The account lives under the town?
It is a town account, just like our general fund is a town account controlled by them. They get the bank statements, they reconcile the bank account. It's similar. Unlike the student activity accounts where we have it, they have nothing to do with it.
We're sure the funds are actually there?
Yes.
Okay.
But two questions. The funds came from a result of continuing education program, the program that Dolores heads up.
Correct. Over however many years. And so some of those programs are the adult ed programs, some of those other programs are the student
Before and after
programs
school,
that she runs.
childcare.
But, so second question then is, in the last couple of years at least, from, if my recall is correct, her presentation has shown pretty much a break even. Am I correct in?
No, actually, the last, in the last 3 years, she's ran at a surplus of about $167,000 cumulative, just those 3 years alone.
What she usually says is,
But it does vary.
She's not supposed to spend, she's supposed to break even.
She's supposed to at least
But that's
break
her
even.
goal is always to break it. Okay, so that's where I misunderstood.
And there have been
Okay.
years, I've got data going back a number of years, there have been years, particularly during the recession, where she actually ran it at a loss for a couple of years.
So if she operates at a loss, then we lose our funding for our enrichment.
Well, this is, my intention really, is to build these costs into the budget and have this part of the general operating budget.
So for the initial year, it would be funded by continuing education?
Correct.
but
And I'm also,
years
we have a real desire to get some of these programs going in this fiscal year, so, my hope would be if it makes sense and it's appropriate and the board has the authority to come to this board and say, I think we might like to have $10,000 for this fiscal year to restart some programs at some of our schools, and then for the next fiscal year, the 50, I think it was 40 at Cider Mill and 10 at Middlebrook. But the intention would be to build it into the next operating budget for 16-17 and have it as an item there. Because I don't think it would be appropriate to run this every single year. I mean, number one, I don't know how rapidly the funds are accruing, but I do think this should be funded through the general operation budget. I see this as an opportunity. That's my rationale today for not having it as part of the initial budget proposal.
I was under the impression that at Cider Mill, we talked about the enrichment in language arts, going back and adding to third grade, starting
World language.
World language.
That's
world language.
next item on my list.
Okay, all right. So this is different from
These are the after-school kinds of activities.
Purely after school, directed clubs, etc.
Right.
So to that end, there's no plan to introduce enrichment during the school day. One would have to stay after school to be the beneficiary.
Do you want to address what you're doing now?
Yeah. So right now, in my schedule, we have something called the WIN block. It's called the What I Need block. my colleague Ellen Tuckner wanted to call the Jagger block. Get it? Okay. I said the kids wouldn't get it, so we ended up with the What I Need block. So during that time, kids get interventions. Did we just get it?
I just,
You don't always get what you want.
yeah, I got it now, okay.
So we have interventions that occur during that time, and we also are providing this year with the way that we were able to schedule, we were able to also have special area staff work. Each student will go through a rotation with an enrichment activity with either the gym teacher or the art teacher or something like that. Again, this is a schedule dependent. If we look at another schedule, I'm not sure I could figure that piece of it out. But even for next year, things that we're looking at for enrichment during the day would be, we have actually a presenter coming next week from University of UConn, has Renzulli. He's been around forever. He's worked with the School of Gifted up at the NEAG School of Gifted for years, and his philosophy is to provide a bunch of tiered opportunities for students to receive enrichment. And what's wonderful is that he has an electronic tool to help teachers more easily be able to provide that enrichment. So what I'm looking at is a tool that it's really dependent upon what's called a profiler, where it's a student interest tool where you can truly find where each student's passions live. And basically, you are afforded then for each child like a bank of truly like enrichment activities that help target students based on their own interests and passions. So that's already in my budget for next year. That's in my supply line. I ended up putting it, but it's delineated. And so that's in my budget. We would use it during the WIN block as teachers get training. We could use it well beyond the WIN block, but the intent would be to support that kind of enrichment during that block, even if I can't have the other staffing to do so. So we're working on enrichment activities. Plus, I mean, you've heard us talk a lot about the workshop model. The workshop model in of itself is a differentiated method of teaching. So all of our literacy instruction, the math and focus program, they all provide enrichment opportunities for the students. So I'm pretty comfortable saying that I believe that our core areas have lots of opportunity for enrichment. What we're looking for is that that extension and that exploration and the ability for students to really explore their passions and to have opportunities to produce in ways that really don't fit during the school day. Looking at this year, I'm working with parents just because we didn't have the funding. We would be very happy if we could access some of this money that you guys were just talking about. But right now, I have a core group of parents that we've pulled together an advisory board to try to figure out how to implement things cost neutral this year. And one of the things that our students have been so engaged with are newspaper writing. I mean, I can't tell you the volumes of newspapers that I am accumulating on my desk. The students just found this passion on their own, and it's like spread like wildfire throughout the building. So I would really like to start that. I've invested in, which is not very expensive, something called the Wordmaster program, which is really reinforces higher level thinking. It's based on analogies. But there's different levels, so it provides enrichment and actually quite a challenge for some of our more identified gifted learners. So again, a nice range of challenging and enriching opportunities. We're in the middle now of developing a survey with the parents to figure out what other kind of interests, like obviously with parents running this and no additional funds, we kind of have to focus on what our kids want. So we're actually creating a student survey to figure out, as we try to add a few other experiences this year, where do we want to go. but I probably gave you way more than you needed, but.
In listening to all of this, what keeps coming to my mind is we need to make sure that we implement a program/system that correctly identifies the needs for all children and challenge every child at the appropriate level.
And that's part of this profile that I was talking about. It truly finds where each child's unique giftedness is.
So do you think, this is more a philosophical question, do you think we're moving towards individualized instruction?
And before you answer that one, that's a simple question, isn't it? That you should be able to answer that in seconds, right? I'm wondering whether, in terms of the planning for the year, whether we devote an entire session of the board to curriculum and learning and the rest, because these are incredibly important subjects. They probably deserve, several hours of debate and discussion after being able to read materials in advance as opposed to in the middle of a budget session. My reaction is we spend so much time talking about financing, and we spend enough time talking about learning and curriculum. I think I'd like to answer that. I'd like to hear the answer to the question. I suspect it's a long, rich, involved answer, but maybe not. Maybe simple. Sure, we're getting there.
It's a simple yes.
Yes. That didn't even take me a second.
Thanks for the sidebar. That 45 seconds. Okay, I'm just busting your chops. Let's move on.
Okay,
But Mr. Likely, I would like to just point out, it's not individualized learning. We're moving towards student-centered, personalized learning.
Personalized. There you
Okay.
go.
Better word.
And the other thing that I keep thinking about is that it's, I think we need to get to a point where we have a common definition of what enrichment is.
Thank you.
And that is with the parents as well as this community, because Chris and I sat at the same table at the community conversation, and there was a parent there from Cider Mill who spoke about the WIN block, and she said, well, my child is an enrichment child, a gifted child, whatever, and yet they're spending all their WIN moments just having like a 45-minute snack and not doing anything.
We heard a lot of people speak specifically about wanting our kids to be able to compete against other schools, that currently we're not doing that. The Olympiads, the science fairs, things like that. We heard from a lot of parents who said they're paying to take their children out.
Yeah, the two that we have are math-based. So we have math Olympiads, and we have what's the other math one? Math Olympiads, and no. It's another math one though that we just do at a different.
The continental math, yeah.
Okay, so to summarize this and move it along, we are looking at a system to try to do a better job of identification.
Yes.
And we're looking at budget neutral ideas, including
Plan A. So Plan
That's
B,
right.
if Plan A, if we get advice that suggests it's inadvisable to try to utilize that surplus, these folks will be directed to go back into their budgets and see if we can cull out. It's, I think, $50,000 between the two buildings is what they're looking for.
Okay.
Plan C would be come back to you and say.
If that surplus wasn't used by us, then what's the point of it sitting there?
Exactly.
Okay.
Perfect.
I also want to just say that with enrichment and enrichment activities, we need to consider it all the way. Cider Mill. I mean, what happens after Cider Mill? What happens through graduation?
Right.
Right. I guess in the other piece, the comment I was going to make before really spoke to Lori's point about this program. We're not addressing giftedness right now. And how we're addressing our gifted students. And that's a very different conversation. It's very complex, and we need to spend a significant amount of time really clarifying our philosophy and approach and developing that program system-wide.
I'd like to propose that, I'll
In our community,
rephrase it.
yeah.
I would assume that that's something that the two of you are going to take up, if you haven't already, within the curriculum subcommittee. So.
What part of it? Because I meant enrichment all the way through graduation.
Trying to address enrichment within what we do.
But the point is that to identify or define the difference between what a gifted program is versus an enrichment program, because I think our parents use the term enrichment as if it's a gifted program.
Right.
That's not uncommon.
And also, something that came up at our table was, Chuck was there, and Glenn, were parents talking about the different types of advisors for clubs. Ken Denaj is a great example, of someone who's very hands-on, very active, very, I mean, you know, the experience
Yeah.
kids get in all Congress is very different than they get
Versus
in
others who
something
just sit
else,
there and
you know.
supervise.
Yeah, and so that's why.
Good, so we'll look to the two of you to come back with some thoughts.
Okay. The other proposal that you mentioned before was our desire to reintroduce world language instruction in grade 3 in a budget-neutral way. And so I'm going to have Jen speak to that briefly, because she's also in the process, and it is a process.
Yes, it is a process. So we have, we're working on our schedule as a building anyways. As you know, we shifted schedules this year, and there definitely were some challenges that we're working through. So we're looking at another schedule. The scheduling committee and my leadership team combined have proposed to the staff, which they are now going to be reviewing, but they've proposed a schedule where cost neutrally we are going to be able to shift world language down into grade 3. So again, I've been very clear with my staff that this is a collaborative process, so they have an opportunity to provide feedback, and then I will ultimately, you know, with the input of the staff, make the decision as to which schedule, but it looks very favorable that we're going to be able to do that at a cost neutral.
That's great.
That's
If it
exciting.
doesn't work, and so
Doesn't
just,
work.
right, so if the staff, for whatever reason, says, no, we don't want this schedule, then we need to go back,
Yes.
and if we're going to do this, we need to either find a teacher or add a teacher.
Okay.
I don't know of another way to get it.
And what about materials and
And
resources?
I just want to say,
Curriculum
along with that,
development.
I'm trying to be very brief here, that involves lots of communication we need to have not K-12, 3-12, as to what does that mean for the world language program, materials, resources, so lots of conversations. I have to get it, you know, the possibility of it first, but then we have a lot of planning to do and conversations as a district, so.
That sounds like a curriculum coordinator's.
Yes, although we don't have a world language curriculum coordinator.
Yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't Bob do it in his spare time?
Of course he can.
Teach.
Are we,
I'll get him on his console.
2 quick questions. Are we talking just French and Spanish?
Yeah,
Like
at
a
this
half
point,
a
it's
semester of
extending
each
what
or
we
something like that
already
in
offer
third grade?
in fourth
Like an
grade.
introduction to both? And then secondly, back to resources and supplies, there currently is no request for any
No.
resources or supplies to support that
So
in
we'd
the
have to
budget.
think about that as well, so that is a point. 2, we have to find the funding for that.
Okay.
Yeah, that
So
wasn't
you
something.
may be coming back to us on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do know that they use a lot of online materials, so that's something that we can probably build as we go. I'm sure there will be some resources. But again, we have to have that conversation as to how things are going to shift, what that means for materials.
When do you think you'll come back to us on that?
I will have a final decision made next week. When's our next? So I don't know if by the next budget workshop, but before the hearing, I'll know.
You'll have some materials costs anticipated by then too?
Materials? No, because we would
Material
have to, I
costs.
have to.
Costs.
Oh, costs. Yeah, I could probably give you an estimate. Yes.
And ideas of where that might come
Yeah,
from?
because I could look at what we spend on our current,
Right.
you know, there would be a little extra, I'm sure, startup costs.
Right.
And it's also not starting from scratch. If you remember, there was a third grade. So it's not as if we're starting, you know, totally from scratch.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't throw everything away when we did it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, the 4th and 5th grade is shifted.
Now a new
though,
office
so-
somewhere.
Yeah. So- Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Okay, the last couple of points I just wanted to call out for you, really around investing in our staff. Chuck had made reference to, with the addition of the library media specialist, you know, we're pursuing our vision of reimagining that work around learning commons, and we're also creating new opportunities for teacher collaboration, which we believe is really critical to supporting our staff as they get better at their craft. So he said it, I'm repeating it because it's important. We're also, our other kind of major investment here is in the area of technology. And you know, the discussions Matt and I have had about an approach to thinking about technology really centers around looking at our infrastructure, looking at the way adults and kids access technology, looking at the ways we integrate it into the curriculum, and then ultimately looking at the way that technology transforms the way we do business. So in the technology budget, you'll see a proposal to fund providing laptops to all of our classroom teachers, which I think is critically important as we move forward in this progression. You'll also note that there is money allocated to upgrading the network to increase bandwidth, because if we're going to, as you saw with all those wireless statistics, we have more and more people utilizing our infrastructure. There's a proposal to provide training in Google Apps for teachers, and we are piloting a one-to-one program at the high school. And I think there's also a related proposal to purchase more Chromebooks.
Yes.
As well as classroom materials, hardware, sound fields, and things like that. So the technology budget is important to us in terms of driving our instructional improvement agenda. That was, in terms of the major points, I think, that I wanted to cover. We had some questions, so if we can go ahead.
Another very positive thing I noticed going through the budget, over the last several years, we've been cutting textbooks. And from building to building to building, I saw additions of textbooks and supplies already in this 1.98 budget, so I just thought that was a thing to point out as well.
Okay. Laura asked a question about textbooks, and Chuck's got some information about that. It's not a complete answer, because some of it's going to take quite a bit. And then, Laura, you had some athletics questions, so if we could address the textbooks, address your athletics questions, and then maybe we'll move on to the cap plan and address other questions that board members have.
So you can find a summary. You know,
I apologize, before we do that, I know you're stepping out. Do you have any questions before we have to depart? Okay, thank you.
And I have some requests, which I'll send. Perfect electronic.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. But they're both digital copies.
Yep.
Yeah, Daddy, if I miss it.
Okay, so in terms of textbooks, if you look again under the supplemental tab, you go to the third page. What I've done is I've consolidated all of the budget requests for textbooks all together for this year. I am in the process of trying to gather an inventory of all of the textbooks in the district, their age, and a cycle. Well, I tried to get it for today, but I couldn't quite get it. So that's something we're going to continue to work on. And I do think, I'm glad, Laura, you brought it up, because I have discovered some things just in talking with people that
Things already exist.
well, that we probably should be monitoring the cycle of textbook replacements a little bit more carefully.
That's what your question was.
At this point, it has been the responsibility of the instructional leaders to come forth with those requests. But I think I need to see it and kind of monitor it. And the textbook in particular that you mentioned, we're looking at very carefully.
Okay,
Maria, didn't you say that you were phasing in one of your textbooks?
Yes, we are. We are going to be bringing forward 6141 for new textbooks in French, and we're going to be starting in 6th grade, and then recommending additional text in the following year for 7th grade, and then the year after that for 8th grade.
And it's been, I mean, I know we had the Spanish classes got new textbooks recently, so.
You know, once you get that inventory of textbooks done, that would be something I think people might find interesting to put on the website.
Sure. You know, we also have to start our discussions about how long we're going to be using hardcover textbooks.
Yep, are you going to include some of the paperbacks that the high school kids, like literature books?
Sure, I can try.
Some of them like are just duct
See
taped.
Chuck over there looking like under cabinets,
Staples
staples,
on
closets.
Some of the things that I don't.
His inventory.
Probably seen that one, that Catcher in the Rye
Like
that Laura read
that
about
Laura Schwimmer
Yeah.
as a child, yes.
just last year. This is great, just to see this in this format, thank you.
If it's okay, I'll read your questions, and then we'll just talk through the answers.
Well,
I will
first let
send-
me just,
oh, sure. Okay.
if I can, I wanted to say that I don't ask these questions to pick on you in any way. I'm a huge fan of our athletic department. I have a son who is an active participant. I just wanted to take a close look at some of the expenses, because as we, as the Board of Ed, a couple of years ago, made the decision to charge our parents a participation fee, obviously, we have a responsibility then to make sure that we're spending those fees wisely.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there's fine answers to all those questions. It just wasn't obvious to me in the black and white pages, so that's why I asked the questions.
I think it's great, and you will get, I apologize, I don't have it for you now, but you will get these questions and answers, and we'll continue to update as questions come in. So you have all of that, it'll be on the web, it'll be in your books.
And I'll say as well that in looking at Laura's questions, she's not the only one that had those questions, so it's.
Thank you.
They come from all of us.
And also to just piggyback on what Lori also says, that I hope everyone, the building administrators and the athletic director know that, we're only asking questions so we can understand it and so we can better support the budget, promote the budget, and that we want to do everything we can for all of you. And it's not, we're not picking on any one person or area. So.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, so Lori's first question. Most of the sports have a planned salary increase of around 1.5%, but a few that are highlighted are higher and a couple are significantly higher. Please explain why the high increases. Do any guidelines exist for yearly salary increases for coaches? Question for Mr. Post. Right.
I don't have the...
We have.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Great.
I have your answer.
Okay.
I'll just read what kind of...
There we go.
The athletic coaches' salaries are set by the teacher's contract. The contract provides the coaches with a 1.5 general wage increase for the 2015-16 school year. Additionally, the coach's salary schedule has 4 steps. Coaches within 1 to 3 years of experience are in step 1, 4 to 6 years are in step 2, 7 and 9 are 3, and 10 plus are step 4. In most sports where the increases is greater than 1.5 is because 1 or more coaches are moving up in a step. In some cases, like the ski team, they're no longer going to be a co-op team. They're going to be 2 separate teams. So we'll have a boys team, we'll have a girls team, so we'll have to have 2 head coaches. Okay. I know this tennis was one of the ones that was a big increase. We have a new coach with millions of years of experience. He's an actual tennis pro. So that was his rationale for his increase.
And basketball, boys basketball, has 9.5.
We just hired a new freshman coach, again, with a lot of experience. He actually could be a head coach, but we're not.
So when you say that there were 3 coaches in the previous year, and there'll be 3 coaches, so there's no net change in the number of coaches, but
Right.
a person was replaced, and this is a person with more experience.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All right, second question. Is the additional baseball coach the assistant JV coach, which was previously paid by the WBSA?
Yes.
Do you have a statement that you wanted to offer to the board? I think you should.
You don't like my one-word answer?
It works for me.
Yeah, my hope is to have the Board of Education pay for all the coaches that we need eventually. And I know that's going to be a long process, because that way that money that the booster clubs are raising could go to something else.
Great.
So that is my hope.
Leads us to question number 3, which was a very good question. Do any of the sports have additional coaches not included in our budget that are volunteers or paid by booster clubs?
Right. Prior to this question, I thought baseball was the only one, but doing a little bit of research that I did today, there are a few
Oh, really?
that are doing that. Yes. I wasn't very happy when I found this out, so we'll be making steps to try to remedy that as the years go forward. It'll take a little time because this has been a very old practice. So,
Are they volunteers or paid for by the boosters?
well, technically, the volunteer isn't paid. However, they're classified as volunteers, which all my coaches are certified anyway, whether they're a volunteer or not. They all have to go through a certification process. But yeah, I was not aware that these other programs were paying their volunteer coaches.
Okay.
But these were coaches that were vetted and hired by us
The volunteer
to be
coaches.
volunteer coaches.
Yeah, the head
Okay.
coach would ask them if they can have.
So backgrounds have been checked and the
Oh,
whole
yes.
thing. Does our insurance cover them as volunteer coaches? Like if something should happen,
I
are we
would
fully
imagine
covered?
they all have to be checked
Yeah.
out.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
So our volunteers are covered under our insurance?
Well, our insurance covers us for the actions of people employed by us or volunteers that we are directing.
So our volunteers,
Liability is covered.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Because they're serving on behalf of the district.
okay.
Right. All right, thanks. Our actual numbers available for number of students served for the fall and winter sports. And so we have charts for you.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and I'll make sure you get all of these. So,
I'm passing these around.
that's only one copy, but I will make sure you get all of them. So I wanted to reformat them, that's all. Question 5, a few sports have a significant variance in the proposed number of students served year over year. It seems as if the projected numbers for this year were way off. Any reason for that?
It's a little difficult with individual sports to predict the numbers. For example, girls swimming, one particular year was in the 20s. The following year, they jumped all the way into the 40s, then went back down to the 20s, now they're back into the 40s again. So for the individual sports, because there is no cuts for individual sports, it's very difficult to predict from year to year. Recent trends, the girls' indoor track teams, outdoor track teams, and cross-country teams have taken off as far as their numbers are concerned. Nobody could have predicted that all of a sudden the indoor track team was going to be in the 90s for the girls, just the girls. So that's taking off. And I do expect that to kind of balance out as the years go on. It's the freshmen and sophomore years trying something new. And that's where they sometimes peters out as the years go on. But those individual sports go up and down constantly.
Great. And,
Yeah, well, that's why I asked you to have the actuals, because it seemed as if some of them were adjusted, but because the way it was presented, we didn't see the actuals. So it looked as if you had already made the adjustment based on this year's actuals.
Right.
But the actuals weren't shown on the paper.
In fact, I'm actually glad you did that, because I noticed that last year I predicted we're going to have 50 cheerleaders. In my head, I was thinking 2 teams, a varsity and a JV team, and that we just didn't have those numbers. Not going to be a varsity team or a JV team for a long period of time.
So I just want to drop a bomb for us to revisit at some point, which is the point of cuts. You know, at what level, what time, where, when do we have that discussion? And I'll look to you all to come back to us. Cuts happen in other districts, don't happen here, pros and cons.
You mean cuts of what, the students off the team, or?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So
You mean
we
setting
can-
specific guidelines about that, or?
No, just that they need to happen for budgetary reasons.
Is your perception,
I
I'm
don't
sorry,
know.
are you saying that you think students do not get cut from our sports teams? Is that what you're
In some cases.
They do get
Well,
cut,
cross
sure.
country and
Team
track.
sports, you get cut, individual
Right.
sports. you
Individual
don't.
sports, and that's the beauty.
Well, how do we
Everyone
have,
gets-
how do we have 50 cheerleaders?
We don't.
We don't,
We don't.
we have 25.
Okay.
Team sports, they do get cut, individual sports,
gonna say they
track and
absolutely
field,
get cut.
swimming,
Okay.
anything that's an individual sport, there are no cuts.
As long as everybody can participate, there's
As long as
no
you
cuts.
Okay, thanks.
But
Great.
you don't hire additional coaches?
No.
Based for the, right, it's-
Right. I did have a
Same.
strange request at the very beginning of the year. We had a significant number of girls soccer players come out for freshmen. And one of the coaches asked me to have 2 freshman teams. And
Wow.
to make a hard decision. No,
Okay.
that's not gonna
Okay.
you
happen.
couldn't do that, could you?
No, that would be very, very difficult. I'd have
Yeah,
to split
I
the
mean,
schedule, and
right.
that would absolutely, that would not be fair for those kids that are around that make the team.
Is there a ratio guideline, students to coaches that, or players to coaches that we need to,
That's something
adhere
that we can
to?
definitely talk about, absolutely.
because that's probably different sport to sport, isn't
Mhm.
it? Yeah.
Depending on the sport and how many people play at a time. For example, basketball, there's only 5 people playing at a time. However, you have to worry about all these kids on the bench that you can sub in. In golf, only 5 people play. That's it. So.
In football, you've got 30-something, yeah, right, and
The
multiple
bigger the better in
coaches,
football.
right.
So.
Okay.
Great.
Thank
So,
you.
Laura, your last question, some sports are projecting a significant decrease in participation for next year. How and when do we consider reducing or increasing the number of coaches?
Well, that goes to
We
the
just spoke
question I
some of
just
that,
asked, yeah.
Yeah, was there anything else you wanted to add to that, or you okay?
Well, once again, based on your chart, you helped me look at cheerleading once again, and for some reason, we have 6 cheerleading coaches listed.
Oh.
We don't need 6 cheerleading coaches. So maximum we would need 4, and that's if we end up with a JV program.
So
Right now,
maximum,
we're at 2, we're gonna stay at 2 for now.
and so the numbers will be adjusted. Okay, great.
The last item on my list, Ken, was the capital plan.
Can I go back just
Oh, sure.
one, back to textbooks? You know, each of the facilities is requesting an increase in the textbook budget for next year. And I think I raised this question, a year ago in this process of our ability to leverage our investment in technology against textbook costs and material costs. And I just don't know what we're doing there. Are we really doing doing as good a job as we could in that area. Electronic textbooks, okay, do we have to have a textbook or something? What are we doing to leverage the money, the millions of dollars we spend in technology, have spent in technology, against a hard dollar cost for textbooks?
The quick answer so far is that we're being forced somewhat by the publishers who are only making their electronic versions available if we buy the paper version. That may change over time, but in order to get the electronic version, we have to buy the paper version. Is that still an accurate
I
statement?
think in many cases, yes. And
Or-
no, go ahead.
No, you're the expert.
No, well, you were at the, I mean, Lori Ellis was explaining to us that it's not always easy to do electronic books because they can be just as expensive as the hard copy books.
They charge us a per, you know.
It's a subscription fee, so you have to keep re-upping the subscription.
Okay.
And Chuck, part of the curriculum review process, you will be
Looking
addressing
at this
textbooks.
very
So I would expect as part of that process, you would look at digital versus
Right.
print.
And we need to make some decisions about our one-to-one.
Yes.
You know, we can't go electronic textbooks if kids don't have devices to read them.
Well, that gets to the next question. I mean, we had a discussion some time ago that we haven't revisited, but I think we need to, about bringing your own device.
That is something that the technology committee is wrestling with.
And you should know, just yesterday
Yes.
on a, what are they called again? Instructional rounds that I went on with Chuck, we sat in on an honor Spanish class, where the class started off, everybody took out their cell phone and logged in to a website, and he did this thing with the smart board, and they put in their answers. So there's a teacher already who already knew that everybody in his class has a cell phone, and he's using that. And where a kid didn't have it, and I don't know if there was anybody.
I don't know, but he said they would share.
But they would share. So whether or not, as a district, we're recognizing the fact that the kids already have their own devices, individual teachers clearly are, and are.
But I have to say again,
Taking
not every
advantage.
child has
Right.
a
Right.
smartphone.
No.
Right, and we need to be sensitive to the fact that if for some reason a child doesn't have one, it does create an uncomfortable situation that we need to be cognizant of, because we don't want any child to be
Agreed.
singled out that way. So-
But I guess my comment is that we really need to move the discussion forward.
Faster.
Faster.
And faster,
please.
yeah, I
And
agree.
come to-
Faster.
But the
Faster.
smartphones helped with the survey, I heard.
Yes, they did. We did the NEAS survey, the Endicott survey, and advisory, and the 5 administrators piloted it with the students, and it was just like, take out your cell phone, here's the information, the login code. I think all the students had one, and 10 minutes later, they were all done. Now, the subsequent wave, we went to do it and have all the students do it at once, and there were some technology difficulties, but we're using that venue through the smartphones to get, we're trying to capture a 95% participation rate, and it's very important to the process. And we're using smartphones and cell phones, and we're gonna get there.
Faster.
Sure.
Accelerating.
One of the things about the textbook budget is that some of the things under textbooks are things like the consumable books that
Right,
students
workbooks and
use.
stuff they get.
Right.
So, for
Right,
instance, we
yeah.
had $20,000 for Math
Yeah.
and Focus. Those are consumable. It
Right.
would be very difficult for the children to do the journals on a
No,
a-
yeah, I
a
understand that,
device.
yeah.
The other thing is that comes under those is textbooks for small children, for instance, in the area of literacy, are all those little teeny texts the little books that they have. So they're not going to do all those digitally at that level, like the e-books and all of those. I mean, at some point, yes, but, it varies. So a lot of those, there's $60,000, for instance, in there for language arts for all of those kinds of books. And those are called textbooks in a budget for elementary students. So it's just to let you know that there's a variety that would be in some of those budget kind of things that are called, this is their textbooks, but.
No, I understand. It disposables, workbooks, is there a one-time
Absolutely.
usage, you've got to replace
Yeah.
them. That I understand. I just challenge us to continue to look, at
Yes.
how we can leverage our technology investment that we keep making year over year.
Perfect.
I guess that's the point.
Thank you.
Capital plan?
Okay, if you look at the last 2 pages in the front section of the book we gave you tonight, you'll have the The second to last page is the non-recurring site work budget, which is the facilities budget that's in the operating budget, and then the last page is the long-range capital bonding plan. So I'll go through the operating budget first. There's two items that are in almost every school's budget. One is Learning Commons, and you can see we put $10,000 in for Miller Driscoll, 10 for Cider Mill, $20,000 for Middlebrook, and I believe it was $30,000 for the high school. We haven't specifically identified what we will be using that money for yet, but we do know that we will need to be buying furniture, fixtures, be doing some refurbishment work in the media centers. So although we haven't specifically identified what we're going to do with it yet, we know that in order to make the transformation that Chuck's been talking about in previous meetings, we're going to have to devote some money to those spaces this coming year. Otherwise, the whole process gets pushed off for a whole another year. Also at Cider Mill, Middlebrook, and the high school, we've put in $30,000 at each school for oil tank removal. The plan at the moment is for the Yankee gas lines to go to Cider Mill and Middlebrook. The gas line is here. I believe it's either at or just about at the building. We haven't gotten the new burners in yet for the high school, but the plan is to do the boiler conversions next summer for Cider Mill and Middlebrook.
Can you remind me, there was some bonding involved in those boiler conversions. Remind me where that stands.
That's been approved.
Right, and what does that cover?
That covers replacing the boilers at the other schools, and it also includes replacing the burners here at the high school.
There was some engineering work involved in that process too?
I'm sure there was, yes. Yeah. I know the town steering committee is struggling, I think, with the fact that some of their estimates may have been too low. So I'm not sure how that changes things. At the moment, it doesn't affect our operating budget.
Who created those estimates?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. It wasn't us?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And as a matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned that. Originally, we were going to be doing replacement of oil tanks, and we had those on the capital bonded budget because the dollars were so large. Since the dollars are relatively small at $30,000 a piece, that's not something we can justify bonding. So we've had to make room for it in the operating budget.
And we're comfortable 30,000 is an accurate number?
Yes. Then additionally at Cider Mill, we've got some funds in there to replace some playground equipment, and I believe that's, Jennifer, for the south, the upper?
South, yep.
The upper playground. And then some indoor painting, door frames, cafeteria, areas like that, $15,000. In Middlebrook, additionally, we would like to spend $15,000 to replace the auditorium, those old wooden doors where you go into the auditorium on both sides.
What's our threshold for putting things out to 3 bids?
We don't have an official threshold. And that is something that our auditors have recommended, that we come up with a policy like that, and that's something that I think our business operations subcommittee is going to be discussing.
Good, thank you. Is that something we frequently do, though?
Yes.
Thank you.
At the high school, we typically set aside about $30,000 a year to refurbish classrooms, and that can be for furniture, fixtures, painting, things that need done on a regular cycle. $30,000 for painting stairwells, and then $10,000 to recover the main lobby wall, which if you look up, it's always peeling and it looks pretty crummy. We're looking at some alternative treatment to put over it so it's not paint and we don't have to keep sending people up to dizzying heights on scaffolds to paint it. And then we've also put $10,000 per building in for security. And that's a total of $315,000 in the operating budget.
Ken, All these areas, these all fall under the 4320 account, remodeling and major repairs?
Yes.
At Middlebrook, we're spending a lot less than we've spent, we budget a lot less than we have historically spent the last 3 years. And is there anything else that we need to do at Middlebrook? Are we being overly cautious from a financial standpoint, or are there other things that may come back to bite us that need to be done that we don't have planned to do? The constant theme we hear from the community is that we have delayed, avoided, have not maintained, have not invested where we should have, and it's causing us. So I looked at the budget. This year we spent 120, the year before 114, the year before that 194, and now we're budgeting 75, which is a big drop.
It is.
So-
I think the reason for that big drop is that we did some major projects in that school over the last few years.
Right.
We redid the culinary room.
Right.
We, over a period of 2 years, redid the STEM room, refurbished the gymnasium floors
Right.
last year.
Right.
So I think we've so we've done some significant work in that
So
school.
we're comfortable that that's a good, that we're not looking at some potential issues down the road. that
We have a
we're putting
thoughtful,
off.
I apologize.
Yeah. No,
We had a thoughtful discussion about it prior
Okay.
to submitting these requests, so we feel comfortable that what was
okay,
requested
good.
is really
Well,
what's.
no,
what's
that's great.
needed
Okay, I just want to make sure that we aren't
Do we-
avoiding
It's-
things that need to get
No,
done.
and that's a good question. So if you notice, in the outer years at the Cider Mill, Middlebrook, and the high school, we've got large amounts of money put in to replace carpeting,
Right.
which is something that we've actually been able to bond in the past. But we were advised last year by our bond counsel that we are no longer able to do that. So although this is not the preferable way to do it, you'd rather do a whole school all at one time over summer. We're hopeful, I don't know if we'll be able to get $300,000 in each year, but we've put that in our plan so that over the course of 4 years or so, we can recarpet each school. And obviously, if we have to, we'll make priorities.
Well, it's probably the right place for it to live. In the in the Middlebrook numbers, does that include, and maybe you don't know the answer, so I apologize, include money to repaint lockers in the girls' locker room?
It does not.
Okay. You might want to look into that, because that was brought up to me. I had a peek before I started, and it was kind of nasty.
I've never,
Checking in the girls' locker room?
I knew that was coming from me.
I couldn't have proved it. Set me up
Yeah,
first.
no.
Well, I will say in fairness to you that that is a space that we really need to revisit. And I think that, perhaps with little funding, we can improve the look of it just by brightening up the space.
Perfect. Okay. I had a similar question to Glenn's on Miller Driscoll. And maybe I'm reading the numbers wrong, so please correct me, but it looked like we have a reduction in the major repairs line of about $30,000. And in the past couple of years, we've had contingency dollars in there for roof repairs. What are we doing in that respect? Because I don't think the roof's getting any better.
that would just be in the repair and maintenance budget, not in this budget.
Do you have the
So is
repair
that-
maintenance here someplace?
Yeah.
It's under the Miller Driscoll.
I thought maybe I didn't pull it off the right line item.
Okay, so we've got in contractual services, page 15 of the Miller Driscoll budget.
Yes.
And that's, again, that's another line item that has fluctuated wildly from year to year depending on what the needs have been. So we've got $43,350.
No, that's designated to the anticipated roof,
Right, but it's not designated to anticipated roof. But
No,
based on
it's-
historical information, you think that's a good number?
Yes.
Shirley, you have any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't know what the cost of repairing that roof is, but I
Okay.
do know that it frequently needs repaired.
And do you feel comfortable that as repairs are noted as needed, it's being done in a timely fashion?
Absolutely. The repairs are being made as they happen, as they need to, and the tiles are removed as they need to. Everything is fixed there related to that roof as soon as they occur. They are very responsive to
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
I got these figures from our facility supervisor, and I can certainly go back to him and ask him that same question.
Okay.
I'd rather, if we still have time and we
Okay.
do need to make a change, I'm certainly happy to do it.
Obvious, some people that are concerned.
Absolutely.
And we'll continue to look at it, obviously, with the building, with the renovation coming. We're not going to put, we'll do what we need to do to keep it protected, but we're not going to make a major investment.
Right,
Because
right.
the roof is getting replaced. Sorry.
Right. But we're still going to repair it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And they've been working from that premise
Yeah.
all along, and they will continue to do right up until the time, that the actual roof gets replaced. And then we do, and we've had those conversations about, it needs to be repaired as we go.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And that is happening, guaranteed.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Is that, where are we?
The treads, stair treads at the high school,
Mhm.
I recall that being requested a year ago, and then we pushed it out, and now I see it's being pushed out.
We
yet
actually
again.
did need to do some a year ago and did it.
And you did that,
Yeah.
okay, all right. So we're in good shape
Yes.
for now, okay.
Yes, if we felt that was a safety concern, we would not have pushed it off.
Of course, okay.
And just to confirm, the cost for relocating the booth is coming out of the security task force funds, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's already been approved?
Yes.
Okay, so we move on to capital money.
Yeah, the capital bonded plan has, at the moment, 3 items on it for this year. The first is to replace the chillers at Middlebrook, and I believe these are the ones in the back section of the school that are the oldest. And then repave the parking lots at Miller Driscoll and repave the parking lots at the high school, which would be the north lot and the central office.
I think you meant to say Middlebrook instead of
Did I say Miller Driscoll?
Yeah.
Sorry. Middlebrook.
Cheryl's like,
I don't know last year's to compare, but were all of these numbers in this
Yes.
for next year or last year?
Yes.
Okay. And we're comfortable that these numbers are accurate?
Yes.
And how did we determine their accuracy?
I believe we have estimates from all of them. I know that the chillers, we got an estimate from a contractor.
Okay.
I would suggest that, on the repaving of the parking lots, that we look at working with the building committee for Miller, because all of that's getting repaved and redone, and we try and get this as a package.
That's a good idea. Absolutely,
Okay.
good idea.
Okay, that would mean deferring it then.
No, well, 15, 16, we're going to start in, we may be able to do it in a second, but put it as a package for what's going to
Okay.
be done.
Okay.
Okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Now, when we did the work here at the high school, we did it in conjunction with the town's repaving the roads, correct?
Yes.
Right, right.
So I'm assuming you could also look at it that way.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And then the outer years, in 17, 18, these items were also on the plan, replacing the roof at Cider Mill and then replacing part of the roof at Middlebrook. Typically with roof replacements, as they begin to get closer to the year where we would actually be bringing these projects forward, we would have somebody come in. So probably next year, we'll have a roof expert come in and take a look at them and let us know if they think we really will need to do it in 2 years. Usually, we end up being able to get more life out of them, but that's when we would, next year, we would have somebody come in and take a real close look at them and give us a report on them.
Just for a reminder, for those at home that this may be new to, we don't replace all of the roof at any one school at any one time. These are roof sections, which is why Middlebrook is out there 2 years from now, and we just did a roofing project there last year or 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
So, just as a reminder. How's the roof at the high school?
Well, the roof at the high school is good. I think Jose and his team keep up on it. We had a frozen pipe today, which was a bit of a challenge, but the roof is okay.
Yeah, that's not on the radar yet.
All right.
And then in the last column to the right, the things that just popped on the radar, and I think all of you know, we do have a program that we work with that keeps track of all these things and gives us projections of when things will need to be replaced and how much it will cost, these placeholders. So these 6 items came on the radar. Repaving the parking lot at Cider Mill, replacing HVAC equipment at Middlebrook, replace built-in equipment, and that's kind of a catch-all category, and for the time being, I've decided to just leave this large number on the plan. It's lockers, doors, fixtures, things like that in the interior. Typically, as with many other things, we get more life out of those things than the program might say. So again, as the project starts to come closer, a year or two, we'll probably dive in a little closer and start taking a real close look at all those items that would be affected and see what do we really think. Maybe we'll just have to replace the doors and it'll be $300,000, and we don't have to do these other things until later, and then we can more accurately reflect what we really expect in the out years. The high school is replace elevators, again built-in equipment, and then building exterior, which could be siding and windows and things like that. So again, that's an estimate generated by this program. So as we get closer, we'll take a better look at it and do our own assessment about what we really think we'll need.
So they're all software driven at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, is that the rest of what you had to formally present?
Yes, it is.
What other questions do we have at this point?
I have a few, but I think they're all really quick ones.
Sure. We'll start with you then.
Page 15 of the district budget. There's 2 summaries of staffing. And some of it's like a repeat, right? Just printed.
Well, one is 14, 15, one's 15, 16.
Oh, so this is the, okay. All right, so when we look at 15, 16, the 9 FTEs.
Yes.
There's 6 instructional coaches, 2 curriculum coordinators, which equals 8, but
Yes,
it says
it does.
9. It's just
Hmm.
getting very confused.
It should be 8. No,
Does
you know
it
what?
save us some
I'm
money?
gonna have to get back to you on that. I don't know.
Okay.
Good catch.
Good catch.
Other question?
Yes, I have more.
Go.
We had $45,000 in preschool tuition. How many students do we believe will be paying tuition at the preschool?
Do you have that number? I don't know that I have
I know we have
that number.
75 projected students, but then how many of them would be?
I could get that number for you. I don't have
So
it
the
off the
question
top.
is, how many anticipated tuition?
Tuition
Yeah.
paying preschoolers.
Okay.
So, because I wanted to know what the per student
Sure.
tuition cost was going to be, and then the follow-up to that would be, again, is it comparable to our area preschoolers? Are we charging enough to cover our cost and that sort of thing?
Right. Historically, it's been somewhat of a discounted rate to encourage people to participate because we have an obligation to try to provide one-to-one student ratios between special needs students and non-special needs students.
Right.
I did actually have a conversation with one of the preschool directors in town last year about whether or not our pricing was seen as unfair competition to them, and their answer at that point was no. So
Actually,
it's something to continue to.
I did take a look at that once. It's really
Right.
hard to compare because it's, in a lot of cases, it's comparing apples and oranges because schools have different lengths of days and different,
Yeah.
4 days a week and things like
You
that.
have
So
to break it
actually,
down
I
to
did
an
break it down to an
hourly
hourly,
rate, yeah.
and on an hourly
We
basis,
did.
we were pretty comparable
Right.
to it. I did, I
We're
know
we're
I
kind
have
of
the
at the
information.
lower end. I think when we did that, we were at the lower end of the range.
Right.
But we're certainly competitive, I think.
And we have a
with-
superior program.
Absolutely.
Come on, so we should be,
Come
Well,
on.
is that going to be an issue as enrollment, like the population insurance? know, if there are fewer preschoolers. Something to think about.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll have some
logically, you would
numbers.
think that that might be the case. Right.
Has not been a shortage yet.
Right. Okay. Others?
Okay, on the high school pages, I noticed in the comments below the health and PE pages that they show a decrease in the health education FTE, and it says due to decreased enrollment, but then on the next page, it shows an increase in FTE for PE due to an increase in enrollment.
We have our mathematical prediction for you.
Rich
But
did
it's-
these.
So they're based on our analyses. It will always bear in mind that it will depend ultimately where the slight increases and decreases are based on student enrollment and course sectioning, particularly as we anticipate this year with a reduction in FTE. So I have here the projections of how this would impact all of our subject areas. It's a predictive model, so that would shift some ultimately with our thoughtful sectioning decisions.
It just, to me, I just thought that health and PE, you always scheduled, it was the same
Kind of
group of
across from
kids
each
who
other.
were taking both classes, no?
Except for
Except
10th
No, there's a lot.
some health as well.
Separate tenth
There's a lot
Well,
less
10th graders take a
health.
semester health class. Don't they?
Yes, you have adolescent health in the sophomore year.
But Jason has a health this year as well.
No, every year when they're in gym,
Right.
they miss
Have
part of
health.
gym to do health.
Right.
Except for in 10th grade.
So this is
All
speaking to just the
students-
10th grade class?
All students take a semester-long course in the sophomore year, whereas health in the 9th, 11th, 12th grade years are the pullouts.
Pullouts. Okay, so this speaks more to the 10th grade enrollment.
That's part of it.
Okay, then that explains, I guess. Do we still do bus transportation for away games for the band? The band are they still going to away football games?
They are.
Oh, they are, okay.
Yeah,
But not
I
the-
think
it's
they've
not the full
reduced
band.
it.
That's a
It's
full.
not the
band.
full band, okay.
They've reduced
Last
it.
Thursday.
It's a volunteer. Usually,
They have to do 2 away games a year.
it depends. It can be as many as 75% of them. It depends on the game and the weather conditions and a whole bunch of stuff. And it's often canceled too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah.
Okay. At several of the schools, like in Middlebrook, under account 1150, I saw that we were paying for grade books and plan books for the teachers. And I'm just curious if those type of hard copy tools are still necessary in this technological age, especially if we're going to give everybody a laptop and the use of
The
Power
use Power
School.
teacher, right.
So we have expenses in there for grade books and plan books.
Do you want my
Laura, I'm sorry,
Sure.
what page did you catch that?
Middlebrook,
It was
what
under
number?
Middlebrook.
Page 12.
Okay.
For some teachers, they are still appropriate and they are still used, and for some teachers, they're not. So there has been a reduction in our general supplies budget for things that are paper-based. However, some teachers really do rely on those for some of the day-to-day things that are not inputted into Power School, that are then calculated as a whole grade. You know, they may take homeworks, they may take 5 or 6 homeworks that they check off, and then input those as a percentage grade for the whole 5 or the whole 10 right into Power School. So some teachers are still using those, while some teachers have just gone right into Power School to input all of their grades. So we have had the conversation, but it is still appropriate for some teachers just based on the way that they're using them.
I just think that as we move forward, we need to be,
Cognizant of that.
But that covers all supplies, it's not just.
I want to,
granted, but it was specifically listed as one of the supplies.
Ken,
Right,
when
but we don't
you
know
do
what
the,
to do
when the software system
Yeah.
kicks out a description for item 6100, is that line item description after it automatically
Generic
pulled?
or-
Is that a generic listing?
It's a specific listing. That's
Okay.
why I asked.
Right.
Good
because-
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
That
principals
comes-
provide us with
Yeah.
this
Right.
kind of detail supporting every single line item in their budget.
Right, that comes from our school, and yes, it is one of many: plan books, markers, index cards, Sharpies, paper, and supplies. It's down from last year. Oh, no, it's up from last year, excuse me.
Never mind.
I will say that the bulk of that money is used for the other things.
The
For
other, and
example,
not that.
things like Sharpies, Post-it notes. Students are doing a lot more annotating of texts, and so they're using Post-it notes
Of
very
course.
frequently across the classes. Those type of consumable supplies are used in group work. And so, you know, you see the grade books, they happen to be listed first, but it's really a fraction of that entire request.
And I would just hope that as we move forward, that obviously those
Yes.
purchases will become fewer and fewer, and at some point we just say, if you still want to use it, you have to get it on your, go to Staples and buy your own room.
And in fact, they have.
Yeah, I'm sure many of them
Purchased
have.
fewer over the years, so we're kind of phasing those out, but.
Next question?
Tuition-paying students, there's at least one at the high school, 18,000, is that our tuition?
That's an estimate. Our tuition will be whatever our per pupil expenditure budget
So that's
ends
still
up.
to be determined?
Yes.
Then how many students do you think will anticipate?
That's based on the fact that we have one right now that we expect
We
to be
only have
back
one.
next year.
Okay.
However, in the Cider Mail, page 1, account 5620, it shows income of 18,000, but in the note down below, it says no tuition-paying students.
That note would be an error then.
So which is it then? It's-
One.
It is one
Mhm.
tuition-paying
Yeah.
student at Cider Mill, okay.
Well, you bring that up. We've had a long-standing and very favorable and productive policy to let our out-of-district employees bring their kids to Wilton free of charge for education. And the decision to let that happen has been the decision of the building principal on whether or not they have space. I think that's a great decision, but I'd like to know that that's being looked at very closely so that we're not either making class sizes too large or increasing sections unnecessarily.
Sure. I imagine we have an accounting by building and by grade of?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, we have that.
I'll send that.
And that might be something to look at district-wide and have a collaborative conversation on that, because as we let kids in at the younger grades, they're going to be in all the way through. So we need to have some discussion about that. Okay.
And the last, just nitpicky, I noticed at almost every school, we're purchasing vacuum backpacks.
Mhm.
And multiple ones. Is this like a new thing or replacing old ones?
Replacement.
So all of these across, all need to be replaced?
I thought, but it's not just a replacement, isn't he updating the type of vacuum that he's using? We need to have John correct that.
Okay.
He's very interested in getting the dirt out of the building.
Yes.
He has a clear plan.
Well, it's a
for
good
doing
thing.
this.
That's
It's
a
a
good
very
thing.
good thing. So, yeah, I don't know that it's existing, model by model existing, replacing existing.
Okay.
I think he's
But
got
yeah,
the type
it's
of
replacing
filter
existing,
quality.
but probably not with the same
Quality.
quality.
He's mentioned something to me the other day that he's working on HEPA filtered vacuum
Allergy
cleaners so
resistant, yeah.
that they don't put out dust,
As
the
a
very
vacuum.
fine particulate retention, that kind of thing.
Any other
Well, I
questions?
just wanted to point that out, that that's an investment. in
Yes, it is.
increased
Yes.
quality.
I don't think we can bond it, but we could.
We
I have a
can-
question.
That's enough
we
for
can bid
me,
it.
right?
Okay.
We can bid it.
Yes, we can definitely bid it. Glenn, any questions?
No questions, I guess, well, perhaps one.
Uh-oh.
It'll be a doozy though, I'm sure.
No, it's not.
It's got 37 parts.
No, it's just, no, it's very simple, or a request. We really haven't done anything tonight but review the budget as it's presented and understand it. Okay, I don't think we've really, and I think that's an indication that I personally am very comfortable with the budget. I think you guys have done a really pretty solid job putting together a meaningful and really, and I think surprisingly aggressive, not financial budget, but aggressive plan on how you're going to spend the money and what you're going to do with what we presented. And it's great to see that some of the things that we would like to see happen and that parents are asking for, we're doing at no cost. We're finding ways to better utilize the resources that we have, the resources being either financial resources or people resources, whatever, to move the system forward. So my only request is, and I, as I said, I am very, very comfortable with where we are, and I think we can go forward with this, but what I'd like to see, and I don't know how we get it done and how we can have some discussion prior to going to the town is, in your presentation last time, each of the schools, each of the principals had a wish list of things. If we could do this, here's what we'd like to have. Is there a way of getting those things perhaps prioritized? Here's the number one thing that, you know, if we could add to it, or if we could do more, here's something that would be meaningful and have a big impact. And here's the second thing, and third thing. Because I think we have room in here to maybe stretch a little bit and do a little more. You know, Chris and I are often in agreement. You know, if it's 80 million, should it be 81 million? Or should it be, you know, 80,500,000 or whatever? Is it really the right amount? And I don't think we will ever get to that definitive answer. But I'd like to see us give some thought to the things that the principal said, you know, all right, if I could have more, here's what I would really do. First, this is what I really need. And it would have this kind of an impact. Because I think that's something we need to look at.
Okay.
Not just buy this as it's presented or accept it as presented and say, all right, fine, taking it forward. I think we need to give some thought to the things that you really feel are important to you, above and beyond this. And can we find room for it? Is there a way we can do it? I guess is my only question.
Do you understand your homework, Principal?
Yes.
Okay.
And now I don't know how we get to that or have discussion around that before we have to go and present the budget. That's the issue.
Should schedule another workshop?
Right, well,
I don't know.
a few years ago, we were fortunate enough to be able to work the existing budget, to be able to cover the transition costs to the new math program. So as we go through the year, sometimes we have some flexibility as well. So having that prioritized list gives us the ability to not only advocate on your behalf now, but also think in the future if we have some flexibility options. I think it's a good question.
Because I think there were 4 or 5 things in each of the schools that you said, well, if we could do this, here's what we'd like to see.
Right.
And so I think we need to kind of rank those and give thoughts to it. This is the most important thing, and with this, if we did, this is the result of this work.
Okay. I don't know. Right, so it's what would you choose, what would be the impact?
Yeah.
And when you say impact, it's not only benefit to the building and district, but also the cost of organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think we have, you know.
Right, I have no.
Chris?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay. I know you don't have any, or do you have some
No.
additional ones? Okay.
That's what-
I had one question, Ken, that I mentioned to you briefly coming up on the stairs, and I'm going to have to probably get it to you in tabulated form, so it makes more sense. But I looked at line item 1313, which is substitute sick leave costs, and I looked at it across each of the buildings, looking at the number of staff in each building and the number of students in each building. And it just raised some interesting questions to me. So Miller Driscoll, for example, has 774 students, 75.8 staff. Their 13-14 actual cost for substitute sick leave was $117,000. Their budget for this year is $150,000. Next year, they're proposing $140,000. We go to Cider Mill, more students at 981, more staff at 85.5, yet their 13-14 actual was $72K. Their budget for this existing year was $85K, and next year is $85K. There's a big difference there. We go to Middlebrook at 1,015 students, 97.6 staff, $122,000 in actual for 13-14, but they budgeted this year at $75K and next year at $75K. That's a big discrepancy in my mind. And then the high school is 1,351 students, 138.7 staff. Their actual for 13-14 was $55K, and they're budgeting $50K for this year and $50K for next year. So Ken's answer to me coming up the steps was, it's hard to predict. A lot of it can have to do with maternity leave and other illnesses that we're aware of, but I'd like to see more analysis on that maybe some more historical information so that we're comfortable that those numbers are
I can do
accurate.
that. And just to be clear, I'm the one who does the substitute budgets, the
Okay,
principals do not.
but it affects them. It's in their numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, I'll reiterate what Glenn said, and I think each of us has somehow conveyed through the evening tonight, which is, we know you came in with an aggressive budget, and we know it was a tremendous amount of work, and we greatly appreciate the effort that you put into that. Personally, I'm incredibly excited about all the positives that you're laying out. You know, the enthusiasm that we're seeing and feeling relative to a new way of teaching and learning, getting laptops into the hands of teachers, looking at bringing back, I'll put enrichment in quotations because whether it's personalized learning or putting a child on a list to say my child is in enrichment or gifted, that's all incredibly exciting. I know we've taken a couple of shots at athletics, but I think the answers have been great, and I really appreciate that. So I'll reiterate on the board's behalf how much we appreciate the efforts that you put forth. Thank you. Our last question is, do we think we need to meet next week?
What would the agenda be?
Well, I would like to
More of the same,
hear-
potentially.
What the principals have to say, their homework?
You have the opportunity on the 5th as well. That's the budget, that's the regularly already scheduled meeting where you're scheduled to make a decision. So if you don't have an opportunity to meet, we could do that day as well.
Yeah, I think we do it then.
You comfortable with that?
Yeah, I just think, well, if you can get together between now and then and get the priorities set, and come back and say, these are the 3 areas and the 4 things that we'd like to add to it.
Great.
And that should be a reasonably easy, discussion to have.
Sure.
Because that would be an interesting thing that as you present initially to the public.
That would take place, the public
On the
presentation to the 22nd.
Well, you take the things that the principals say,
Sure.
this is their biggest wish list that's not represented, so that as they come up for public comment, they can give you their opinion about that, and we can hear
Sure.
their opinion about those items.
Can you all get that to me prior to the 22nd?
Absolutely.
Terrific.
And it would be nice for us to see that prior to the 22nd.
Of course.
Yeah.
We're not surprised, yeah, I can imagine. Son of a gun! Uniforms for everybody.
I wasn't putting something on top of your.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I would also, as you continue to comb through the budget, if you want to send questions,
Right.
I've gathered all the questions tonight, plus the ones we have. Those will go into a spreadsheet. I'll collect them, and then, like we did with Lori's questions, on the 5th, we can just review whatever new questions, so that way you have a record that's really read into the public
Right.
of the whatever other questions you have.
Great, and as everybody did, please, if you feel comfortable, send your questions to the alias so all of the other board members can see those.
Yeah, I think the only other comment I would have is, for the people at home watching who, perhaps haven't taken the time to read, there's a cover sheet that goes with each school's budget request. And all you have to do is read it, and you understand clearly what's going on and how good things, and how positive things are. Because it's exciting, it's positive, it's really good reading. So I encourage everyone to take it, both the overview at the district level and the individual schools' cover sheets.
That's a good point.
Okay, because they're really wonderful, to read that. And,
Right.
we're doing good things, and it's exciting.
Molly, you'll try to get that up in the next day or two.
It's already there.
It's hard,
It's already there. It's
the things
embedded
we
in
got
the
Okay,
on
detail.
yep, there's some pieces that are in here
It's
that
part
are.
of, the only parts that are not up there are the supplemental and
Yeah, so
So
the
all of-
overview and the points of pride should all be embedded in.
everything that you got by email
Is already there.
is already up on the
What about the
website.
rest of the stuff that's in the,
Just the supplemental.
Just the
the supplemental
It's just
stuff?
supplemental, that's it.
And you'll get that up
I
there?
can, sure, as soon
in the
as
next
somebody
day or
gives
two?
it to me.
Okay.
Mr. Chuck.
Okay, so and it'll be up there in the next day or two. Is that a safe comment?
First thing tomorrow.
Perfect.
Oh, Chuck, pressure's up.
Okay. I have nothing else to say.
I'm all set, except thank you. I appreciate your time and attention and engagement.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Let's hope. It's our, as bad as it was.